I'm Joe McManus. I am living in a house in Lenzie, to the edge of Lenzie. This is really in the country as opposed to half in the country, and our idea was to live in a bit more of an open space and plant trees. The whole point about it is, as far as possible, is to have it as wild but as controlled as possible. We were really keen that we planted trees and that we had no lawns to mow, and we didn't have flower beds, but we just had wildflowers and whatever nature threw at us. The reason we went for this sort of design was in close cooperation with Chris, the architect. We wanted a place that was friendly to the environment and didn't use up a whole load of resource in terms of heating, and use local materials as far as we could, and materials that could be replaced and reused. He came up with the idea of a wooden frame and a wooden clad house, which we were very enthusiastic about. And he also came up with the idea of a passive house, which we'd never heard of before. It's really interesting how looking at a plan and experiencing it in the flesh is really quite difficult and different. We didn't realise that the cathedral roof upstairs would be quite so tall, and the impression of space would be as big as it is. And one of our first comments when we realised what it was going to be like was, wow, it's going to be big. And I think that the light coming in and the combination of that with the wood floor, again, it wasn't until the wood floor started to go in that it became apparent what that was going to look like. We didn't really understand how effective that was going to be until it happened.
My name is Stephanie Wilson, and I'm the client at the Coach House here in Arnott Hill in Falkirk. It's absolutely wonderful. It's an absolutely amazing place to come home to every single day, better than I could have ever imagined when we were just at the very start of it, just drawing sketches and getting ideas. The original buildings were here, and I really wanted to keep the two buildings that were there, and so that was such a big part of the brief, but also wanted to introduce a kind of modern part so that we were able to link the two buildings together and be able to get a lot of light and use the garden space as well. So the courtyard arrangement really just allows us to feel sort of cocooned within the house, but yet kind of draws us out into the garden spaces, which we tend to find that we kind of gravitate out there because it's such a lovely space, and that we use it all really. We use the courtyard, and we tend to find, because of the level thresholds, that it feels like part of the house, that it's a big space, whereas it's not a very large floor print, but actually it feels like such a bigger space because you're actually getting in the whole garden and everything. Yeah, just even the sounds that you can hear every day, that when you open the doors, that kind of has a calming effect, and the sort of loftiness when you come from just walking in the front door, and then you come into this big open space where it kind of uplifts you and you feel kind of enlightened when you come in. So that's such a big part of it, and all of these light spaces really have a really positive impact on the way that you feel, and that's kind of how we feel living here every day. I didn't expect it to be so light every single day. We wake up every morning and it's pure sunshine streaming through the windows, and we feel like these kind of this light wakes us up rather than an alarm clock. It's very strange having that, which I never expected. So, and that's with having sort of light at all aspects of the house. So.
I'm Stuart Cameron, partner of Cameron Webster Architects, and I was the project architect on Due West, Lunga. Well, primarily what you're seeing is a section that's derived from getting sunlight in and getting view out to the primary view. So we're standing under an angled sloping roof with the sun streaming in the clear-story windows and the facade to the view opening up out onto the deck. with the ancillary spaces, kitchen, entrance hall, toilets, utility room, under a lower roof to the south, so the sun gets over those ancillary spaces. The site, as we found it, was a natural cleft between two rock formations, running on a roughly north-south axis. So, having looked at several layouts or possible types, running the house along that axis made sense. It maximised the view, and it allowed you to create a wall, because the prevailing wind is coming in from the west-southwest. So it enabled us to build a wall across the cleft and a sheltered entrance courtyard to the south. And that's basically the driving force of the plan. And the driving force of the section is, as I've explained, about sunlight and view. Materials-wise, it's a timber kit house. It's a Scot frame, value firm prefab house. With various amounts of steel, as you'd expect, because we can't lever out over the edge of the cliff. Material selection was coated pre-weathered zinc with a special coating to stop any salting where the rain doesn't wash it. And the rest of the walls on the first floor, Siberian larch, with a CU coating to give a uniform weathering. And it's just the sheer robustness of off-saw Siberian larch. And downstairs we went for a stone cladding, because we were in the stone cleft, and that kind of made sense. So actually the sheer joy just working with clients that let you do what you do, but at the same time understand what you're doing and actually help build parts of the building.
Mark Lawson from Lawson Builders Limited. We're in Fern Cottage in Nethy Bridge. We were the successful contractor for the project, for renovation to the cottage and extension to the house itself. So what's pleasing about the project was the actual design, that we're involved in such a bespoke piece of architecture in this area, which isn't a kind of common occurrence that we get involved with tenders, and the success is the outcome of what we were standing in today. You know, I think it's just the quality of craftsmanship and the whole overall project and what we've delivered, just from the quality of materials and glazing that's been used in the project. And we're proud of what we've delivered for the client. It's a very challenging project that all of our tradesmen got involved in, and quite passionate about delivering this for the client. Just visually seeing the relationship of the kind of the new contemporary extension linked into the existing stone cottage, and just a simple little thing, even the glazing from that hits the stone wall, and seeing the stone continue from externally internally, just little things like that just kind of make it all something they're all kind of proud of.
Robin Burley, and we're here because this is the house of myself and my wife, Lindsay. We built it between 2008 and 2016, and it was an idea that we had to create something in a kitchen garden which had clearly dated back to something like 1830. And what we wanted to do was to create a house and a home where we had a very natural transition between the inside and the outside, and that that home would not impinge on the garden, it would add value to it. The transition between inside and outside works extremely well because there's level access between them. But I think that the integration of the garden and the house is also achieved by the old path system that the original kitchen garden had running through the house, and that's picked out by the pattern of the Caithness flagstones that are there on the path outside, and they come into the house and create the paths in the house. I think I'm really pleased how quickly it settled down, because if you had been coming here only 3 years ago, it would have felt like a site. It would have a building on it, but it would still have the feel of a site in various parts. And the planting would have been immature. So in that short time, it's now become really quite lush, and the house itself is starting to feel part of the garden as opposed to something that's been put into the garden.
So I'm Pamela, and I'm
Walter Anderson. We're the owners, and this house has been adapted mainly to meet our daughter's living needs. We moved in June last year.
Yep.
We've been here almost a year, and it's absolutely fantastic.
I think it makes our life together as a family just much more cohesive. So we're not separated, and the house just accommodates Ailey's disability and her mobility. So actually, we can just be together without any equipment or needing to be separate, and that's really important. Definitely the open plan living. So the fact that we can have this lovely wide space where Ailey's equipment lives, and we're not having to put it away in cupboards and bring it out. It's there, it's accessible for her, and there's room for us all. But also just the accessibility of the wet room from her bedroom, which is making living and caring for her and the physical caring aspect of her much easier on us as carers.
Accessing the garden as well is a big point for Ailey. She loves to be outside, and also the fact that there are very few walls within this house now. Ailey has a visual impairment, and for her to know where we are in the house, just for a bit of security, makes a big difference. So, she loves being here. We love being here. It works for us.
Well, Archie is 7 and is football daft, and the large garden certainly meets his plans. And actually, the space is so big for us all that he can, he can bring all his stuff out, have everything that he wants, and he likes being around us. He's not off in another room doing something. He likes doing his own thing, but in the vicinity where we are, and that's just really nice.
I think the amount of light that comes into the back of the house, doesn't matter what season we're in. We've been through winter here, and that has been absolutely fantastic. Ailey loves watching the garden, all the wildlife going on. The amount of light that comes in, the warmth that this house has is just incredible. We've never lived anywhere like it.
I'm Robert Gillen, and we are at the moment standing in the sitting room of Mulbewey's house, Goggerbank, Edinburgh. When we first found the building, it was in a state of disrepair, but we realised the potential just by walking around it and even recognising the amount of original features that were still here. What we didn't realise was the amount of work that we were taking on, but it turned out to be absolutely fantastic because the end result is incredible. It's a brilliant place to live. The light is fantastic. We see the changing seasons through the glass windows, through the clear story that we installed. Visitors are very pleasantly surprised when they drive up to the house, because from the front elevation it looks quite plain, but as soon as they come through the door, they get the surprise of the light pouring in through the clear story. And that's something that David and I intended to happen, because originally we thought we'd put windows on the elevation where the garage was, and the architects talked us out of it because everybody wanted that element of surprise as you come through the door, and we think that works perfectly. The clear story was really another part that we love, because originally it was, the courtyard was full of bamboo and plants and trees, and living in a 3-acre garden, or having a house surrounded by a 3-acre garden, we didn't need any more plants inside the space. So the clear story now covers the courtyard, which really is the sort of hub of the house now, because it encompasses a dining and kitchen area, which we absolutely love. We've got roe deer that walk through the garden at 6:30 in the morning, and they occasionally come and drink from the pond up at the top of the garden. The garden's been here since 1956. The garden will continue to grow and develop as long as it's controlled in the nicest possible sense. But we won't be here forever, so eventually someone else will come in and hopefully love it as much as we do and desire it and keep it going.
Andrew Brown from Brown and Brown Architects. We're in Stratton, which is in the eastern edge of the Cairngorms National Park. The brief was a house for 2 people that is zero heating, so it's heated just by the sun and by body heat and by a stove in the winter. And it's a great site on the edge of a floodplain to the River Don, with a kind of bank of mature trees along one side and then open views out across the plain on the other. It kind of started from the idea that we wanted a building to be part of the landscape. That creates the roof form in that it is monopitch, it follows the slope of the land. But the wall is inside the building, but then also outside, so it continues the eye out into the land, and it draws you along that circulation space at the back. And that creates a barrier between the kind of access track at the rear, and then everything the other side of that wall is completely private. So that's where we have large expanses of glass, and it's a softer material. That's where we've wrapped the building in timber. One thing that was interesting for us was, it's a bit architectural, but how the timber's detailed and the way it turns into the reveals is something that we then went on to explore in other projects and refine, and this was a good test case in many ways, which is not something you can normally say of a job that's done for such a tight budget, but it gave us an opportunity to work with a simple materials palette and to really think about how those things were put together. It's also a very efficient plan, because it's 120 metres squared, which is 2 beds, a bathroom, a big kitchen living, a dining, a bike store, utility room, outside external space that's also secured. So it's actually just space planning is probably the element of the project that we're happiest with. I know that's not particularly attractive as a notion, but it's really important to get the most out of the budget and get the space that the client needs. And it's that's probably the thing that we're happiest with in this job.
I'm Liz Roxburgh from Roxburgh McEwen Architects, and the house is called Westside and it's located in the Pentland Hills, and we're actually in the Pentland Hills Regional Park. Well, the house was to replace an existing house on the site, and that house was really designed to protect from the weather. So it had very few windows, and in fact it wasn't protecting from the weather very well. It was damp, it was cold, it was wet inside, and it was filled with dry rot. And so this new house, we reoriented it so that you maximise the views, because it's on a hilltop site. So now you get these great views from both sides, which you just didn't get in the previous house. It was dark and dank. Well, so as I said, it was in the Pentland Hills Regional Park, and so you have to respect the landscape setting of that. So it was quite an easy choice to give it an agricultural aesthetic, a kind of barn aesthetic, and that's where the timber came from, and the tin roof. And then we try to incorporate the stone dike into it to kind of set it in place. From inside, so externally, it has agricultural, rural aesthetic, but we have it is slightly more contemporary in that we kicked out that south corner, which brings the roof lower down, and that gives it a little twist. It's not completely traditional. We've got really large dormer windows in it, which from inside you'll see have a fantastic effect, both on the inside of the house in terms of the light coming in, and externally the views that you get from them. The study has wall-to-wall glass, which is a really nice environment to work in.